Welcome to PHP Fundamentals. My name is Julio Quevedo for Framework Television. Today we're going to talk about functions. So what is a function? A function is a block of reusable code that can be executed by being called from anywhere in your script. A function helps keep your code simple and organized. So instead of having to write a block of code that performs a particular task in many places in your script, what you can do is write it once and call it whenever needed. Let's take a look at how functions work. Here we have a file with several functions, and let's take a look at the simplest one of them. Let's take a look at the syntax. We start with the keyword function, followed by the name that we give our function, followed by a set of parentheses. In this case, these are empty. There's nothing in here. We'll see in a minute that we can put variables here, or arguments as they're called. And then we follow it by a set of curly brackets. Everything that's inside these curly brackets is going to be the executable code of the function. In this case, we have two echo statements. All right, so how do we make this work? First, let me show you something. We're going to comment this out. We're going to refresh this, and there's nothing. So even though the function has been written, nothing shows on the screen. And that's because in order for the function to work, it has to be called. And we do that simply by writing the name of the function. And in this case, there's nothing inside the parentheses, and so we put nothing here. So by writing the name of the function, we are calling the function. And in this case, let's save first. We have our output. Now this is the simplest kind of function because it takes no arguments and it has no return statement. We're going to explain what those mean in just a second. All right, functions. Let's take a look at a couple of functions that take arguments. Once again, we start with the keyword function, the name of the function, and this time inside the set of parentheses we have two variables. When we call our function sum, but we already know how to do that, simply write the name of the function. We have to include the same number of arguments as in the declaration. So we have created two variables here. Variable 1 with a value of 4 and variable 2 with a value of 8. We pass those arguments inside the set of parentheses. The function receives the arguments and it outputs the arguments to the screen, in this case as a sum of both, using the echo statement. Let's take a look at how this works. Let's save the file. And by calling the function and giving it two values, we simply get the sum of them, as you can see from the definition of the function. Now let's change this to 18, save again, and we get a new value, 22. So this is how a function works with arguments. And we have a second function that works in the same way. The function is called uList. It takes 4 arguments. The first one is the 4 arguments are strings, and the first one is simply a title for our list, and then the next 3 variables that it takes are going to be the items. This function we have used to create an order list. All right, and let's do this. Uncomment, save, and let's see what happens. We have passed 4 arguments to our function, and the function uses the arguments, the first one to give a title to our list right here, and then the next 3 arguments, it uses them as items on the list. This is the second way to write a function with arguments. It can take any number of arguments, but it's usually a good idea to keep just a few arguments. You don't want to write a function that takes, for example, 10 or 20 arguments. That's never a good idea. All right, let's take a look at functions with a return statement. Let's comment this out first. Now, what is a return statement? These functions are almost the same as the previous two that we had, except for the fact that instead of outputting what the calculation has been made, outputting into the screen, the calculation is returned to the main program, to the main script. So by calling our first function here, let's see what the output is. All right, we need to uncomment this. All right, let's take a look at these two functions with a return statement. We are using the same variables that we used here, but instead of having the function send the result to the screen, it is returning it to the main script. And here we are calling the function right here. We are passing the two variables, and that result is being stored in a variable. Now we can do with this anything we want. In this case, we are putting it on the screen, but that's the main difference when you're using a return statement. You usually store the return value in a variable, and then you can use it in any way you want. Same thing here. Instead of simply putting this onto the screen, we saved it in a variable, returned it to the main program, to the main script, and here it is when we call our function, and this is how we get the value that is returned by the function. We store it in a variable, and we can do anything we want. In this case, we are simply putting it on the screen. Let's take a look at one more thing, and that is called variable scope. Let's see how that works. And in order to do that, let's quickly comment those sections. Save and refresh. All right. We have one function here. And what this function does is it takes an argument, it adds 3 in this case to the argument, stores it, and puts it on the screen, right? So this, I am the number from the function, is our first line over here on the browser. Now, because we have added 3 to the number that was sent, the output is 8. But after calling the function, right, we call the function here, and we send a value of 5, we get this echo statement on the screen with a value of 8. We go back to the main program, to the main script, and what do we see? We see that the value of the number is 5. Now, why does this happen? Well, in PHP, there's something called variable scope. And what that means is that it matters where you declare your variable, where you create your variable. This variable has been created outside of this function. And that means that it will only work when used outside of the function. This variable, even though it has the same name, this is a completely separate variable because it is being created inside the function, inside the body of the function. So this changes, but this doesn't change. If we were to, as an example, if we were to change the name of this variable, right, to, let's save, let's refresh, if we try to use this variable that we have just created outside our function, let's see what happens. We get an error. So this variable right here, as far as PHP is concerned, it doesn't exist outside the function. It only exists inside. So that's it for variable scope. And let's get rid of this. Well, that's it for functions today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next episode.